What was the most WTF moment from a children's movie or TV show? In an episode of Thomas the Tank Engine, Henry the locomotive doesn't want to go out of a tunnel because he doesn't want the rain to mess up his paint job. So the railway director, Sir Topham Hatt, or the Fat Controller for you Brits, has him ducking bricked up inside the tunnel like he's in the goddamn cask of Montillado. That one episode of SpongeBob where they cook up the nasty patty to kill the health inspector and then they try to bury his body. The Rite of Spring segment from Fantasia is pretty ducked up if you're a little kid who loves dinners, and what little kid doesn't. Basically the highlights are Pteranodon gets eaten, Stegosaurus gets eaten, the rest of the dinosaurs die a slow, agonizing death from thirst. The end. The actual story behind the music for the Rite of Spring is pretty ducked up too. It's about a prehistoric tribe that select a young girl to dance herself to death to appease the gods. Rugrats All Grown Up had a summer special where the cast goes camping at a historic campground. At the end, the kids are watching a video recording of their trip and Angelica asks what happened to the boy they befriended there. He appears on the TV with glowing red eyes saying, like they ain't got no brains or nothing. I haven't seen that special since, and looking back, I think the backstory of that campground was like the Donner Party. On the Magic School Bus when Arnold took his helmet off in deep space and immediately died. That shit was pretty heavy for a kid's show. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory Gene Wilder version had a riverboat tunnel horror scene with movie flashes which a chicken being beheaded, millipede crawling across a guy's face. When I was about 7 years old and realized everything that happens in Hunchback of Notre Dame is because some old asshole wants to duck a gypsy. Every episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog are on their own a set of WTF moments. Or like the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy, anytime they did a close-up of the characters and had that disgusting amount of detail on them made me say WTF out loud every time. I will never forget the tramp stamp joke in Cars. When Artax sank into the mud and died in Never-Ending Story, I was inconsolable. I could not wrap my kid brain around WTH I just saw. In Rocco's Modern Life, Heiferwolf, a steer is accidentally mistaken for a cow and gets affixed with an automatic milker. While not explicitly shown, it is heavily implied that, lacking udders, the equipment was attached to his penis and his facial reactions indicate that he was brought to orgasm. Nala's duck mean eyes to Simba. Disney has been turning kids into furries since at least Robin Hood. When Jessie got addicted to caffeine pills in Saved by the Bell and was freaking out singing I'm so excited before straight up ugly crying and collapsing into Zatch. Leslie's death in Bridge to Terabithia. I'm watching a kid's fantasy flick with my 5-year-old, and boom. Did not see that coming. How is it no one mentioned David Bowie's Bulge in Labyrinth? The series finale to Dinosaurs. They keep inadvertently screwing up the climate environment, and when trying to fix things they only make it worse. It ends with them having killed all plant life and covering everything in poison. They show the family huddled inside their house worried about how it will all end as the camera pans out, and you realize the show ended with the self-caused extinction of all the dinosaurs. That scene in Coraline, where the two old ladies put on a borderline burlesque show, complete with pasties for the kids. Okay, all of that movie was pretty ducked up for a kids film. Tapeworm episode of Mr. Meaty. That episode is the reason why I'm still too scared to move from medium rare to rare. In Big Top Pee-wee there is a 1 minute plus makeout scene and eventual implication that Pee-wee ducked the Piccola sister. Then, Winnie, Pee-wee's ex-girlfriend, ducks all 4 Piccola brothers. Return to Oz the Wheelers, Headless Princess Mombi, all of it. Amazing World of Gumball, The Outside. Thinking that Richard's dad must have disappeared because he went to prison. The family tries to replicate prison for him at home, with overtones of RP, guard abuse, corruption, and mental illness. Truly a laugh, so you don't puke kind of episode. There was an Australian show called Round the Twist. In the episode Whirling Dervish, a kid gets a fish attached to his dong, and it starts to spin like a propeller. He uses it to win swimming races. When Patrick turns into a gorilla in SpongeBob. The live action gorilla suit was oddly really creepy in the cartoon setting. They had this segment afterwards with the family sitting in a living room, basically giving the TV a WTF look. I found it a fitting close. Animals of Farthingwood. All of it. It was like cartoon Game of Thrones and the Animal Kingdom. The episode from Courage the Cowardly Dog perfect. One scene in particular haunted me until I was 12. The scene where Courage fall asleep and that weird fetus thing appears on the screen. That scared the shit out of me. Honorable mention the TMNT episode Insane in the Membrane. Scenes of a man putting nails through his arm. I remember when I was a kid watching Punky Brewster, and they had that episode where they played hide and seek, and the one girl got into a refrigerator and almost dies. Quit watching the show after that. Mama had a chicken. Mama had a cow. Dad was proud. He didn't care how. Recently was watching Peppa Pig, which is for, like, actual babies, and Peppa did something so savage that I lost it. It was so unexpected. She calls up her friend and is bitching she doesn't know how to whistle. The friend said, "I've never tried. How do you do it?" And Peppa explains, and the friend whistles on her first try. The scene cuts to Peppa holding the phone away from her face with her eyes all wide, and then she just ducking hangs up the phone laughing my freaking butt off. For me, the first thing that comes to mind is when Bill Murray's zit pops on the teacher's face in Osmosis Jones. It was disgusting back then, and it's just as disgusting now. I was lifting at home while Movie Channel surfing last week and Monster House was on. Hadn't seen it before. There was a pretty solid vulva joke within 5 minutes of me turning the movie on. So it's a girl house. I just now got that joke. Batman the Animated Series. There was a scene of Joker going over some blueprints. Harley is on the table and says something like, "Don't you wanna ride your Holly?" and proceeds to make motorcycle noises. In iCarly, Fred's apartment number is 8'D. Took me a bit to get it. There's an entire episode about cream pies, and in the air conditioning episode Sam is offering people $20 a blow. It's not particularly WTF, but near the end of Toy Story 3 when the toys all hold hands and accept their fate in the junkyard is pretty dark for an otherwise fun and exciting film. I still love that scene, but man, it just takes a turn there for a few seconds. There's a character in Adventure Time that turns a bird inside out. Also the freak deer that takes its hooves off. In the original Transformers movie cartoon, towards the end Optimus Prime dies. He turns black and everything. So, I was around 5 at the time, maybe 4. My dad had heard rumblings of this, so he went to the theater to see it by himself. He said the place was packed with dads and their kids. The inevitable scene happens, and it is just a cacophony of screaming and crying, and people walking out. When it came out on VHS, he decided that I'd be mature enough to handle it. I remember watching it by myself in the living room while he was getting something in the kitchen. Said he turned around at one point to me in the doorway of the kitchen with tears running down my face, and I just said, "Optimus Prime is dead." I threw my Optimus Prime toy at the wall, shattering it, and ran off to my room. Why, oh why, did the creators and writers think that was a good idea? That would been like killing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle or something at the time. An absolute hero to elementary school kids. Jesus. I was wondering how far I'd have to scroll to see Prime's death. There's a few childhood movies that were a bit traumatic, but that one really sticks out because it broke the formula of heroes face rough odds, but always come out okay. Well, Theoretically one could say that the entire show of Invader Zim would fit here, but there's one episode that stands out in my mind as just ridiculous, even by standards. Dark Harvest. Anyone who has seen the show knows what I'm talking about. Basically, Zim steals human organs, replaces them with random objects. But here's a couple other highlights of this episode. Dub scans Zim's internal organs. If I remember correctly, he gets super fat and weird due to the excess of organs. Gaz's game slave is the object that replaces one of her organs, and she shrugs it off, continuing to play it through her body. Zim replaces one of Dib's organs with one of those things where you tilt it, and it makes a mooing sound. As per Invader Zim style, it ends in a creepy way, with all of the effects disappearing by the next episode. Also, this episode was referenced in a murder investigation, where the guy stole people's organs. Apparently he was fascinated by this episode. Bonus, there was one episode where Dub went inside out, and you could see it. Also, there's an issue of the comics where Gaz is using this gaming console that's totally a copy paste of the headset from Sword Art Online, and Dib pulls it off. She gets mad at him, and basically sucks his soul out of him, and puts him into the role of the playable characters of tons of games, forced to do the bidding of whoever plays the game. Honestly, it's actually pretty deep. There's a ton of gaming references in it too. The Invader Zim comics are made by a ton of the creators, and if you haven't read them, I'd really recommend it. It stays true to the show, and is really awesome. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe,